Aro lowered his head, his entire enormous body somehow coiled up on the much smaller altar, acting as a pillow to rest upon. "You're here, with me at the end. That's all I needed." Much as Ivan wanted to do more, to demand details and dig into whatever these issues were, he accepted the urge and then let it go. Staying in this realm wasn't an option. He learned the last time that his presence did nearly as much harm as good, and besides, Ivan had kids to get home to. Camping out in another world, waiting for some mysterious danger to appear, wasn't going to fit in the weekly schedule. "In all my travels, I have never known a soul, a friend, more loyal and steadfast than you. I want so badly to save you, to break this world beneath my heel until they offer up anything and everything to keep you alive. But this is clearly the path you believe is best, and taking away a friend's agency is a damned poor repayment of all you've done. So I will wait, Aro. I will wait until the end. You won't be alone." Another hissing chuckle as Aro's eyes closed for a long blink. "Most would consider the notion of saving a god to be a grand undertaking. Only you could think of it as temptation to be resisted." The eyes opened, though they seemed cloudier than before. "You have the strangest talent, Ivan. Gods, elementals, demons, beings meant to be defined by their very power. You make us feel so very mortal. The idea that someone would watch over me, protect a god themselves, is supposed to be ridiculous. Yet seeing you there, I can't help but be comforted. When you're around, I know things will work out somehow." Those eyes closed again, and this time the lids remained sealed as Aro took a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you, Ivan, for the freedom you provided, for the adventures you led, for the friendships you helped me form. I have lived many lives, and none were nearly as exciting as the time I spent being your pet snake." "Not a pet," Ivan sighed, falling back into their old banter for what he feared would be the final time. I know. You would never take another sentient creature's freedom." This time there was no chuckle, only a dry hiss that sounded like scales scraping a throat. "But whether you accept it or not, a part of me will always belong to you." Gently, Ivan laid a hand on Aro's snout, nearly wincing at how fragile his scales felt. Soft breathing indicated his friend had fallen asleep, the golden glow gradually moving across his coiled blue body. The two sat like that for over an hour, and likely would have remained in the same position for a full day, if they'd been undisturbed. Sadly, such was not the case. The temple's doors slammed open without warning, a dozen people in white and tan robes marching through without even a pause to pay respect. They were laughing and cheerful, only a few holding weapons at the ready. At the front was a broader-shouldered man who'd added some armor to his robes. Upon seeing the room, he barked out orders. "Looks like we've got a single devotee. Kill him, and then strip that altar. Make sure to cut up the snake into small pieces. We don't want it reforming before Virati can consume them." The band of intruders moved to comply, only to find their feet frozen under the baleful glare of the lone worshipper. He'd risen to his feet in what seemed to be a blink, and everyone in the room could sense the dreadful waves of magic rippling forth. Not just the volume he contained, which was staggering in itself. The type was even worse. A magic born from chaos, an energy of absolute unyielding destruction. An older member of their order collapsed to the ground, her hands shaking. "No, no, it was myth. It was nothing but myth." "What's going on?" The leader had grown impatient and stepped to the forefront. An instant later, his head toppled from his shoulders. Aro's lone worshipper stood before his body, blood dripping from his hands. "The demon conqueror!" wailed the woman on the floor. "It was said Aro once served the demon conqueror, and the blight upon us all has returned." With fresh fear they faced the man, who pushed their commander's dead body over with a casual swipe. You're going to tell me who this Viridi is, and where I can find them. I would recommend you speak fast. When Lodestar flew off with Chloe, she left behind a very befuddled Beverly and Tori. After grabbing showers and changing into new clothes for the day, they found themselves back in the kitchen, staring out the balcony where two different beings had entered with very different agendas. In the time since VRX-77's first attack, Tori had never let herself slow down. Working on the suit, getting ready for her product launch, busying herself with a job for the guild, life had been non-stop. But now, just as she was forced to slow down by circumstances, Lodestar came along and challenged a core tenet of her very identity. Of course we're villains, Tori muttered, intending the comment to be solely for herself. With Beverly so near, however, it was unavoidable that she'd overheard. I hate admitting it, but Lodestar wasn't entirely off the mark. Even if you don't especially like them, I doubt you'd let innocent people die if you had the power to stop it. Plus, neither of us have much passion for crime. Excuse me, did someone forget I was originally nabbed robbing a lab that belonged to Dr. Mechanical? Tori pointed out. I survived as a thief for a big chunk of my life. Out of necessity, Beverly countered back. You're pragmatic, not kleptomaniacal. When getting something legally is the easier path, that's the one you take. Stealing wasn't the point. Having what you needed was. Tori shrugged at that, somewhat uncomfortable at how clearly her friend had seen through her. Beverly had no issue carrying the conversation forward on her own. Socially speaking, we also tend to hang out with capes more than other villains. Granted, a big chunk of that is because the new science sentries are our neighbors and quasi-security guards, but we haven't really pushed them away. Once Beverly finished, Tori waited several seconds before reiterating her point once more. We're villains. I know we're part of the crime isn't what defines villains of the guild, Tori said, certainty growing with every word. She could practically hear Ivan's voice in her ear as she paraphrased the advice he'd once offered her. If it were, we wouldn't have a counselor representing those who want to do nothing but live in peace. No, what defines us is something more nebulous, more dangerous, and more powerful than a simple love of burglaries. What makes us villains is the freedom to live in almost any way we see fit. Beverly's mouth twisted into a half smile while her gaze remained steady. Almost? After a few seconds, she realized the answer to her own question. The code. So long as we abide by the code, we can do anything else, including pal around with capes and engage in minimal crime. Tori hesitated as more words formed, ones she wasn't sure she wanted to speak. Because despite all she was saying, deep down Tori herself wondered if Beverly wouldn't be happier on the side of the superheroes. If given a real chance, would she grasp it? And part of that freedom is the ability to change teams, at least right now, Tori finally added. Lodestar made it pretty clear to me when we met during that Star Scouts shit show. If you wanted to jump over, the guild wouldn't object. Having chosen that moment to take a sip of water, Beverly slammed her plastic cup down too forcefully, causing some to slosh over the side. You think I'm considering it? I think you're my friend, and the kind of person who throws themselves into danger for the sake of others. Not telling you it was a real possibility seemed like a shitty move. Beverly's jaw visibly clenched and relaxed several times before she spoke again, gaze darting between Tori and the balcony windows. I'm not. I would never join Professor Quantum's organization, not fucking ever. But honestly, I do feel like I should be doing more with these powers. All my life I've been taught the importance of duty and service, and now that I have the kind of strength to make a real difference, is my grudge really worth more than all the good I could be doing? Questions like that were exactly why Tori didn't think Beverly was well suited to the villain's lifestyle. Not that she planned to voice such an opinion. Why does that have to be the trade? Because I just said I would never join that piece of shit's little club. So don't, Tori rebutted. Not every superhero belongs to the AHC. There are lots of independent operators. Plenty because they hate organizations, some have other support, and a few just don't need anyone else. Beverly blinked, visibly stunned by such a straightforward notion. When one got used to thinking in dichotomies, it was too easy to forget other options existed. I can't just go around saving people. Can I? Does it break the code? "We're supposed to keep a low profile," Beverly pitched. "That's only when committing crimes," Tori shot back. Having Fornax as a mentor meant she knew the guild's sacred set of rules backwards and forwards. "I think Fornax's fight with the Rexren made it clear that some actions are fine in the public eye." Huh. Beverly finished the rest of her water, then silently grabbed a roll of paper towels to wipe up the earlier spill. Only when she dropped the soggy mass into the garbage did words emerge once more. "That's a lot to think about." Tori was about to suggest they contemplate the issue over an early lunch, as she was downright famished from the prior night's adventure. Before she could, however, a loud knock on the door put them both on guard. No one should know they were back yet, save for people like Lodestar. Tori tried to ready a fireball, only to discover her heat powers were sluggish to respond. Evidently the weariness was affecting her more than she'd realized. Beverly's eyes were shining with dangerous green light as she looked through the peephole, ready to become Bahamut in a moment's notice. Except when she turned back, the glow was gone, and Beverly quickly waved at Tori to relax. Yanking open the door, she revealed Ellie, who looked like she too was fighting off exhaustion, with bags under her eyes and a rumpled blouse, noticeable details given her typically composed appearance. No sooner did she see Tori and Beverly than Ellie rushed in, closing the door behind her. "I thought I heard voices. Thank goodness you two are back. I'm in a major bind and need your help." Chapter 45. Shiny silver domes dotted the hilly landscape, interconnected by a series of clear tubes. Chloe and Lodestar made their way through the facilities, which appeared to be a high-tech sort of treatment center, as near as Chloe could gather. They'd passed no shortage of people in lab coats and scrubs, though she'd yet to see anyone easily identifiable as a patient. Every dome they passed through had an outer section and an inner section, with the latter being sealed off. Those they skipped straight past, only using the outer portions to connect with other tubes. They walked largely in silence until Lodestar piped up, nearly startling Chloe into jumping as she did. "Do you know much about superhero history? Famous teams and figures, that sort of subject?" "Never studied it directly, but I have some general knowledge," Chloe replied, very curious where this sudden topic would lead. "Does that knowledge cover Faithful's betrayal?" Chloe very nearly missed a step. How would she have missed that, exactly? It was one of the biggest news stories of the year when it happened. Faithful, former superhero and long-standing member of the Alliance of Heroic Champions, had murdered most of his team, seemingly without reason. The lone survivor had attempted to strike back, but Faithful had proven too strong. In the end, it was Lodestar who brought him down. "He killed his team, as far as I know. Everyone but Mr. AV. That is the official story, and one I will ask you to hold to once leaving this facility. As I said, there are more secrets than yours being kept." At the mention, Chloe adjusted her mask. It was garish, to the point where she suspected Lodestar had picked it up during a Mardi Gras long past, but did fully hide her facial features. "What you need to understand about Faithful is that, despite what many people think, his name isn't ironic or a joke. Faith is the source of his power, the font from which he grows stronger. We've seen it before with various metas who seem to run on the concept of faith or divinity. It's just what he has faith in that makes him so dangerous." Even though she knew the answer was coming, Chloe couldn't quite stop her tongue from spitting out, "What did he have faith in?" "Nothing." Chloe actually did stop walking this time, brows creasing in confusion. Just as Lodestar was about to explain, the barista's head snapped up. "Oh, you're being literal. Nihilism. He truly believes in nothing." "Precisely. And thus, that's how his power manifests. Nothingness, negation, the power to wipe away that which exists. Faithful doesn't just destroy something, he edits it out of existence. And the consequences of that, well, you're about to see for yourself." As they talked, the duo reached a new dome. Only this time, Lodestar didn't skirt the edges. She walked right up to the center, punching in a code and allowing several scanners to sweep across her. Only after half a dozen lights and beams had evaluated the superhero did a doorway finally appear, and Lodestar waved Chloe to follow her through. Inside was an apartment. At least that was how it appeared. Kitchen, living room, space dedicated to painting. This was a space someone called home. There was more to it. Large pieces of machinery built into the walls that Chloe had no point of reference for, shimmering landscapes projected through fake windows, and somehow the scent of the outdoors hung in the air. "How? Seriously, how do you always manage to arrive when I'm on the toilet?" The voice crackled through the room from unseen speakers, eliciting a small chuckle from Lodestar. Roughly a minute later, there was a flush, and another minute after that, a door at the inner dome's rear opened. Out of it came a woman, sitting in a large silver chair that was floating several feet off the ground. Her legs and left arm were missing, the ends of the limbs covered by gleaming silver caps, and a large helmet covered the entirety of her head. From the sides of the chair, robotic tentacles stretched forth, several reaching into the kitchen and bringing out a pitcher of lemonade, then pouring 2 glasses. "Well, surprise or not, it's always pleasant to have guests. Who is this new marvel you've brought to see me? A healing meta of incredible renown? Or maybe a temporal twister who can try to spin things back?" Seeing the woman's condition, it felt fairly evident why Chloe had been brought along. There was only one phrase she had that would fit the situation, after all. What perplexed her more was why she'd been needed in the first place. While metas who could regrow limbs weren't exactly common, neither were they unheard of. Someone with access to this level of resources would surely have gotten to try standard options first. So why hadn't they worked? "How much she reveals is her choice, same as you," Lodestar replied. Then she vanished in a golden blur, only to reappear embracing the middle-aged woman as tightly as she dared. "Reality manipulator, we think," Chloe added. She couldn't even say why the words bubbled up, only that it felt right to share something of herself in the moment. The woman chuckled, patting Lodestar's back with her right hand. "Ah, I remember the early days, trying to figure the complexities of a power out. You can call me Francine, though feel free to use your cape name. Mine is more dangerous to use than my real one these days." I'm still. A pleasure to meet you. Please, call me Cliché." The heavy helmet tilted slightly to the side. "That's an interesting one." "Hopefully it will be equally as effective." Lodestar finally let go of the hug, rising back to her full height and walking to Chloe's side. "Is there anything you need before trying the saying?" Much as she wanted to quietly shake her head, Edict had told her that their level of understanding influenced their abilities, like how she could squeeze much faster healing out of the same saying. What if understanding the type of wounds she was healing impacted her effectiveness? There was no way to be sure either way, not with so little few tests to pull from. But Chloe could feel the muted tinge of hope in the air. This was a person who had met disappointment many times. If there was a chance to help, Chloe had to make the most of it. "I've recently learned that my mindset impacts not only how the phrases function, but how well they work. The more you can tell me about what we're doing, the better I think our chances will be." Lodestar appeared torn, but Francine's helmet was already nodding along. "Did she tell you who gave me these injuries?" "Not outright." "But you know it was faithful," Francine prodded. This time it was Chloe's turn to nod. The silver tentacles slithered up the side of her, reaching up to the helmet and tapping various switches. "His attacks are horrible, finding a piece of yourself suddenly missing. But the aftermath is even worse. Part of my power is rapid healing, yet I'm still exactly as injured as the day it happened, because what he takes is just gone, unable to be healed by any method we've found so far." Francine paused, as did the tentacles. "Do you want to see for yourself?" "Not at all," Chloe admitted, her hands shaking from merely her imagination. "But I came here to help, and I want to give my best." "Brave girl." Francine's voice came out softer, barely above a whisper. "Be careful. I used to be a brave girl, too." With a final tap from a silver tentacle, the front screen of the helmet cleared, revealing what lay underneath. Various wires and tubes were woven in strategically, but the sight was instantly apparent. Francine was missing the entire front half of her face, open flesh and bits of skull, all that could be seen. Chloe fell to her knees, gripping her stomach, only to find Lodestar catching her before the landing. Horrifying as it had been, shock was equal to revulsion in that moment, because Chloe had finally realized why there was so much secrecy around this woman. Both legs, the left arm, and her face? Chloe knew who'd taken those injuries. A cape from Faithful's own team, one of the 4 he supposedly killed during his betrayal. "Wispy, you're alive?" It was hard to say how Tori had gone from a night fighting for her life to be woken up to face Lodestar, and now, less than an hour later, was holding a basket with balloons, crepe paper streamers, and a dozen noisemakers, while Ellie fervently hunted for more supplies amidst the market's meager selection. "Thanks again for coming," she said, repeating herself for what was the 5th time by Tori's count. "It's just been so nuts lately. Between hunting for monsters, breaking through from other dimensions, patrolling for normal crime, and all our supplemental training, I feel like I haven't had 2 spare minutes to rub together in weeks." Beverly walked over with a large box of pre-frozen burgers, looking at the arm-sized basket Tori was holding and sighing loudly as she adjusted her grip. "We're happy to help, but are you sure you'll even have time to celebrate if things are that busy?" Ellie's exhausted face scrunched for a moment before she composed herself. "Not really. I can't risk letting the night go unmarked. We have to celebrate Austin's birthday." Sensing the emotionally charged moment, Tori grabbed a 6-pack of mid-range beer from a nearby shelf. "Can't forget refreshments, then." The last thing she had bandwidth for was even more interpersonal drama. Bad enough she'd said yes when Ellie asked for help picking supplies, but she looked so worn out, Tori hadn't found the heart to decline. "We may need more than a sixer after these last few weeks," Ellie said, grabbing a bottle of hard liquor from a lower shelf. "Things are really that bad?" Beverly asked. "I mean, they are and they aren't. Every breach detected has been contained so far, but the effort of being always on guard is wearing us down. There's no leads to chase or trails to follow, no warning at all. One minute things are fine, and then suddenly there's a monster ripping up the rose bushes." Ellie rubbed the bridge of her nose, platinum blonde hair cascading in front of her face. "That's part of why I want to throw Austin a great birthday party. We really need some time to relax and cut loose." Buzzing in Tori's pocket grabbed her attention. She snaked her phone out with a free hand to find a text informing her that her presence was requested at Astmeyer Country Club that evening. There was no signatory, nor was one needed. That establishment was the address they used locally, existing mostly just to conceal a dedicated teleportation system in the basement, one that would transport authorized individuals to a certain volcano island where villains gathered. The guild was calling a meeting. That in itself was strange enough. Rarely was there cause to gather its members in person. But odder was that moments later, Ellie's own phone emitted a high-pitched screech. Jarring and impossible to ignore, Tori would bet that the alert had been chosen for messages that could not be missed. Noting the way Ellie kept her screen close while reviewing the missive solidified Tori's suspicion. Something was going on with the capes as well. Whether the two incidents were related, she'd find out soon, but she couldn't get Lodestar's words fully dislodged from her brain. Soon, the divide may shrink even further. What exactly was going to pull villains and heroes closer together? Aside from Ellie's party, of course. Okay, so far we have streamers, balloons, burgers, a 6-pack of beer, a bottle of vodka, and no cohesive theming, Beverly surmised, drawing everyone's attention away from their phones. What else do you usually get for Austin's birthday? Again, Ellie's face pinched, though this time she wasn't as quick to recover. "I don't. None of us do. This was Ike's thing. Big, over-the-top celebrations for our birthdays, despite some very vocal protests. He always said it was fun, watching the discomfort of humble people stuck in the spotlight, but I think it was his way of showing affection." Looking down into the basket Tori was holding, Ellie's eyes shut fully, and a trio of small tears fell down. "It sucks, doesn't it?" Before Tori could decide whether to lie and offer comfort or deliver the harsh truth, Beverly piped up. "To hell with this!" The clatter of a box hitting tile made both of them jump, only to find Beverly hunched over, picking it back up. "I was trying to make a statement, but then realized it would be really shitty to leave this in an aisle. My point was, we're not letting you bust your ass with what little time you have to put on a, yes, admittedly small-scale celebration. Tori and I will handle it." "You will?" Ellie asked, essentially taking the sentiment right out of Tori's mouth. "Yes, we will. We have some contacts in the local entertainment scene. I'm sure we can get a nice dinner and outing put together. That way, you can unwind too." Beverly met Tori's incredulous eyes with a glare that dared her to tell Ellie they were backing out. Eventually, Tori blinked first. "Sure. Leave the heavy lifting to us." She did feel bad for Ellie, and seeing the relief on her face, Tori was a villain, not an asshole. Well, not an asshole to people she liked. Besides, they were already going to visit the guild that evening for whatever the message had been about. Why not see how the Guild of Villains felt about facilitating a superhero's birthday party? Chapter 46. Unlike Aro's empty temple, This one was filled to bursting with revelers. Tankards of sacred wine were quaffed down as drunken hymns of praise spilled from mortal lips. Thick-armed warriors, ever-hunched scribes, even a handful of musicians added their gifts to the celebration of Viridi. Seated on a luxurious red cushion in the center of the ruckus was a mongoose, the size of a wolf with golden fur. Viridi basked in the adoration of his followers, allowing their praise to fuel his power. His temple was formed from dense wooden beams, perfect for bounding around the ceiling on, which gave the entire structure the sense of a skeleton. Viridi liked to imagine them as his own body, one he was steadily growing into. Someday he would stand equal with his own temples, which would mean it was time for the mortals to build him new ones. For now, he adorned it with paintings, silks, and various magical knickknacks. Some were true artifacts, others mere baubles Viridi couldn't resist. He adored shiny things, and magical ones gave off the loveliest glow. Interwoven with his fine decor were banners of his supporters hung from those very rafters, with one in a place of prominence this evening. The Ujero lineage had offered up services of renowned mercenaries, specialists in pouncing on rare and potent targets. Soon Viridi would have the flesh of another living god before him, one bursting with divine power and helpless to fight back. That it would be the body of that cursed serpent made the triumph even more satisfying. Meddlesome Aro, always poking his snout into affairs that were none of his concern. How many of Viridi's schemes had that troublesome snake torn asunder? What was Viridi to do but attack his foundations, luring away and killing his clergy, spreading tales of abandonments to sow doubt, planting bandits on the roads to his temples, and yet still that damned serpent persisted. Not for much longer, though. At last the efforts had borne fruit. Aro was reincarnating, weakening himself in the process. It was the chance Viridi had been waiting for, an opportunity to taste the blood of someone further along the divine path. He never fully understood why Aro didn't come for him directly, a conflict that would have been bloody and brutal, but with Aro likely standing as victor. Viridi could only assume it came down to cowardice or ego, the snake unwilling to accept it could only defeat him through raw force, rather than cunning. Twisting his head with speed no mortal could witness, Viridi looked out a window with a gem-studded frame to the starry sky. Where were those lazy mortals, anyway? Did it really take so long to procure a simple, unconscious deity with the tools Viridi had provided? It was annoying. But what mortals lacked in usefulness they made up for in disposability. Eating one of the group would send a message, and next time Viridi would expect prompter service. Footsteps came from just outside the set of golden doors, and Viridi felt a thrill of excitement, followed by a sudden unwelcome thought. Why hadn't the scouts sounded an alert that someone was approaching? Both of the doors ripped off the hinges, flying through the air and embedding themselves deep within the rear wooden walls. Where revelers had stood in their path, only a trail of blood and viscera remained. The attack was so shocking, no one had a chance to process it before a single man stepped through the now eternally open door. His clothes were simple, appearance unremarkable, yet a dark chill rippled through Viridi's gut. The sense of power cascading off this intruder? Even as a god, he felt imperiled. That was before the intruder lifted his head, showing off eyes that were dark pits of endless void, save only for the center, where runes burned a hellish red hue. Once, before things turned so acrimonious between them, Viridi had asked Aro about the rumors he'd once traveled with an entity known as the Demon Conqueror. The snake had spun some ridiculous tale of adventure and humans growing powerful, an obvious fiction meant to further fuel his own legend. From that day on, Viridi had dismissed any such tale as nonsense, and he'd never even considered such a possibility when scheming against the serpent. Letting out a guttural scream, one of his followers charged the intruder, axe raised high overhead. As soon as he got close to the man with dark eyes, the axe-wielder's head vanished in a spray of red, his body running 2 more steps before collapsing to the ground. "Why have you desecrated the rites of the most holy Viridi?" Another of the followers stepped forward, this time trying words rather than fists. He also made sure to keep a healthy distance between himself and the new arrival, eyes darting to the dead body of the first attacker. Those burning eyes swept the room, and when they landed on Viridi, the god knew true fear for the first time in ages. "I've been looking for you." "Kill him!" Viridi screeched, his normally composed tone nowhere to be found. He comes to unmake all we hold sacred. Kill him while we can! They wouldn't be able to, of course. No amount of faith could grant them the power to accomplish such a task. But as the demon conqueror was buried by the task of slaughtering the mortals, Verity would dash off to freedom. While the threat might be more powerful, it was a rare few who could match a divine mongoose's speed. Obeying his commands to the very end, the worshippers charged. As they surrounded the intruder, blocking the line of sight between them, Verity sprang. He dashed along the ground, leaping up to the rafters and bounding toward his hidden exit, all in the span of a single human heartbeat. Just as he was about to wiggle through the modestly sized exit, a hand grabbed Verity by the spine, dragging him backward. Frantically, he clawed at the wooden beam, managing only to carve deep grooves in the material. Spinning around, Verity saw the impossible. Somehow the intruder had managed to not only match his speed, but had crossed the distance between them in an instant. Sensing how desperate the situation was, Verity lunged for those horrifying eyes. If he could scratch them out, it might buy him enough time to flee. Inches from the man's cheeks, Verity stopped as a second hand snared him by the neck. He felt the intense pressure in those fingers, the barely restrained strength. And unfortunately, thanks to his divine nature, Verity also felt the snap that came next. His neck broken, life began to slip away. Desperately, he tried to heal himself, but a small trickle of magic from the intruder rebuffed such attempts. Lifting Verity up to eye level, the demon conqueror snarled, his naked hatred on full display. "You tried to kill my friend!" It wasn't an accusation. It was barely an explanation. More than anything, it was a statement. Like Verity had violated a law of the natural order and was an idiot for expecting anything other than this to happen. The dying god would have begged for mercy. Could he still move? Though even then, he doubted it would have mattered. Looking away from Verity, the intruder cast his eyes around the temple anew, lingering on all the magical treasures Verity had collected from other, less appreciative owners through the years. A small slice of a smile cut through the seriousness of his expression, one that burned the last of Verity's tattered hopes at survival to wind-swept ash. "At least it seems as though you have the means to make amends. Dozens of trinkets, and the body of a freshly killed god. I cannot imagine how that will fuel Oro's power in the next life, but I'm eager to find out." It was one of the most famous betrayals in superhero history. A team of capes who'd worked together for years, were known and beloved by the public, and had proven their mettle time and time again. Led by Rowanhart, the members included Wisby, Folter, Tossboss, Mr. A.V., and Faithful, but it was those final two members who were the most famous. While the rest of the team were middling in terms of power, Mr. A.V. and Faithful were in another league. The former was able to conjure characters from famous television shows and movies, while the latter could wipe away virtually anything from existence. Bullets, energy blasts, barriers, Faithful waved his hand and they were gone. Then, one day, when Mr. A.V. was wandering the screens, Faithful waited until they'd finished up a job and a crowd had formed, plenty of press and witnesses. Only once a proper audience had arrived did he act, removing Rowanhart's head with a snap of his fingers. Instantly, a wave of inky darkness passed above the team leader's shoulders, leaving behind only a bloody stump in its place. Folter tried to charge forward, stumbling as she discovered a hole in the center of her torso. Tossboss had picked up a sedan to hurl at Faithful, but suddenly his arms were gone. The car crashed down on his skull, splatter staining the street. Wisby was on the move, using her agility to try and get closer, but went slamming to the ground as her feet vanished. Clawing her way across the ground, she tried to crawl forward, only for her arm to disappear. Faithful had stood over her, waves of darkness moving slowly, dissolving her head face first. But that was when Mr. A.V. arrived. The video Chloe had seen cut out there, as the power Mr. A.V. used interfered with cameras and similar recording equipment, but given the last images of Wisby were of a mutilated faceless body, she'd assumed the cape to be deceased. Yet here she was, sitting before Chloe in a high-tech wheelchair. "You know who I am?" "I took a meta-history course at my community college. Your team was one of the units we covered." Slowly composing herself, Chloe rose to her feet. "I'm sorry for what happened." Yeah, well, that makes two of us. Wisby let the vitriol in her voice sit on proud display, though it wasn't pointed toward Chloe. All these years later, I still don't understand why that worthless, soulless damned fucker pulled his shit. Adding insult to injury, I didn't even get to watch Lodestar here take him down. You know, she did it with a single hit, right? Slapped Faithful right across his stupid face and knocked him out. It was the sort of artless attempt to steer the conversation Chloe had gotten used to living with Tori, and so she knew well to play along. They didn't have any video of that. It exists, Lodestar corrected. It's just pretty boring. I struck too fast for the footage to capture anything but a blur. One day I'd still like to see for myself. Wisby took a long breath before turning her once more dark helmet toward Chloe. Which brings us to why you're here. I assume Lodestar explained the trouble with healing my injuries. Truth be told, my hyper-healing is what allowed me to survive the initial assault. And even now my body is trying to fix these wounds, but it can't. And no spell, tonic, charm, mutagen, or other meta-based ability has succeeded either. I can't even use robotic versions of the limbs. All of which is to say, please don't get your hopes up. The sentiment was so surprising, Chloe wondered if she'd misheard. Wisby's concern was for her? Evidently, her confusion was apparent despite the mask on her face, because the seated superhero added explanation. I'm used to being disappointed by now. This is my life. And while it's not what I once had, it's better than what most of my team got. But you're a caring person. You must be to help a stranger like this. I know it hurts when you want to save someone but can't. Trust me. If there is any lesson you take from being a superhero, it's that. So please, don't get your hopes up. Whatever you're trying likely won't work. Kind as the words were, they had an antithetical effect to their intention, because seeing Wisby's concern for others after what she'd been through only made Chloe want to help her all the more. So what was she waiting for? Maybe not, but we won't know until we try, Chloe replied. Time heals all wounds. Seconds ticked by, and Chloe felt some minor aches in her body dissipate. Her focus was locked on Wisby, though, waiting for some sort of sign that a change was taking place. Chloe wasn't just a healer, she was manipulating reality itself. Surely that bested whatever ability Faithful employed, right? After a full minute passed with no discernible difference, the truth was clear. She too was unable to fix what Faithful broke. Word-based power? Wisby asked. That's a neat one. I do feel better, for what it's worth. My body might heal on its own, but that's got a soothing mental aspect too, doesn't it? Unfortunately, I think I see the problem. Lifting up her left arm, the one that ended halfway down and was covered by a metal cap, Wisby waved it about. Technically speaking, these aren't wounds. They're just things that do not exist. My body can't heal this hand because, as far as all of reality is concerned, I don't have a left hand, and that's just how it is. Pain radiated from Chloe's own left palm, where she realized her nails were digging into her flesh. When had her fingers formed a fist? Probably during the long minutes she waited, watching as her supposedly incredible power did nothing. Because of what? A trick of the language? The way she perceived the word wound made the task impossible? No, not impossible. For the first time since receiving them, Chloe felt a true tug to use Edic's words of power. With those, she could absolutely fix Wisby. For that matter, she could snuff out Faithful in recompense, or maybe damn him to the same fate as Wisby. That was the trouble with Edic's offer. It was too much. Chloe was human, fallible, and absolutely did not trust herself with the power to dictate the terms of reality itself. But when she saw things that simply felt wrong, it was hard to hang on to that resolution. And in truth, Chloe wasn't even sure if resisting was the right thing to do. Lodestar was living proof that what mattered about power was the way it was used. What if she'd held herself back, fearful of the impact her power could have? Whatever the right answer was, Chloe knew she wasn't going to find it in an emotionally fraught moment, and she certainly didn't want Wisby to be the test subject for a phrase she'd never spoken. I'm sorry. I wish I could have helped. You did, Wisby assured her. That mental part is really... it's nice. Beyond that, though, I like seeing the up-and-coming capes. Reminds me that even if my team is gone, the good fight goes on. You've clearly got a good heart. Don't let the disappointments outweigh the good you're doing. Always remember the Grove. While Chloe had no idea what Wisby was talking about, she nodded along anyway. Inwardly, though, Chloe was already reviewing every idiom she'd studied since discovering her powers. Not wanting to tackle the problem using Edict's power didn't mean she was giving up. Somewhere, there had to be a phrase to undo the effects of Faithful's attacks. Lodestar had asked Cliché to help, and Chloe wasn't quitting until she found the words to make that happen. Chapter 47. They're taking pity on you. Ellie walked down the street, blinking her eyes in an effort to force them to focus. Beverly and Tori were a few steps ahead, bickering about what to get for dinner. She hadn't meant to zone out, but exhaustion was taking a sizable toll on her body and her mind. Poor little superhero girl, too busy defending the world to throw a party. The imaginary Ike shook his head. You put them in a tough spot. What else were they supposed to do? Classic Ellie, trying to take on something yourself only to fall back on others when the going gets tough. The Spectre was wrong. She knew that. Tori and Beverly were her friends and, frankly, didn't really seem to care about her being a superhero in the first place. Others reacted with awe or even reverence when the new science sentries appeared, but those two had barely even batted an eye after learning their secret. At the time, she thought they were playing it cool, but time proved that they simply didn't give a shit. Or maybe it's that they don't care about low-tier superheroes who haven't proven themselves. I countered, obviously privy to her thoughts. I doubt they'd act nearly so cool if Professor Quantum or Lodestar showed up. She partly agreed with Ike. Who wouldn't be dumbfounded facing Lodestar? But Professor Quantum was another story. When Tori had worn his costume to Hollowville a few months earlier, Spooky Trudy had informed her the powers weren't working very well due to her own dislike for the man. Because Tori hated him and didn't want him to be powerful, her own costume was inhibited. Although that didn't answer why Tori loathed a man she should have never even met. It was admittedly an oddity, though not a terribly unique one. As the world's first superhero and metahuman, Professor Quantum had been around longer than anyone else. More time for making enemies and mistakes. They'd been warned about past grudges popping up, though Professor Quantum had neglected to give them any sort of information regarding the man named Alfred Settler. If you were braver, you'd just ask. You know I'd have done it. Ike sprinted ahead, waving his arms in front of Tori. Hey, why do you hate Professor Quantum? Did he ruin your family's business with aggressive patent lawsuits? Maybe he kicked you out of your home when grabbing up land for one of his facilities. Or, hell, it could be you just spent 5 minutes alone with the man at some point. There are so many possibilities, and I'm stuck wondering because Ellie won't move her tongue to ask. Ike, the real Ike, probably would have done something like that. Asked a loaded, potentially inappropriate question like it was nothing at all. Something about his personality, the refusal to take anything seriously, even himself, allowed him to get away with what would normally be a social faux pas. Ellie didn't have that talent. Despite the substantial amounts of physical alteration she'd undergone, her early life had been one of a quiet, easygoing person. Ellie would never have described herself as particularly shy, more that she was happy to go with the flow. Perhaps that was why Ike had taken a shine to her originally. She was easy to pull into his schemes. Her foot grazed a step, and Ellie realized they'd made it back to the apartment. Had they really already walked the blocks home? It definitely didn't feel like it had been that long. Then again, she couldn't also really recall the last time she'd gotten deep, restoring rest. Patrolling 4-dimensional breaches was draining, but Lodestar was careful to keep a rotation schedule so no one got overworked. It was Professor Quantum's team-building training that stole the rest of her time, leaving Ellie feeling like she was dragging lead balls as she ascended the stairs. She'd spent so long in that stupid training chamber, she could practically hear her team arguing still. Hey now, I'm the only imaginary voice in here, thank you. Ike pointed up the staircase, rolling his eyes. Those voices are real. Ellie felt a knot of dread form in her stomach as she crested the top step. Sure enough, there was her current team standing in the hallway, Austin and Richard arguing over something. When she stepped into view and all eyes turned toward her, Ellie realized it wasn't something they were fighting about, it was someone, specifically her. And there she is, returning at last. Richard stomped over, his shiny formal shoes leaving scuffs along the wood. You were authorized to take a brief rest outing. Brief! Do you need clarification of the meaning of the word, or perhaps a course on the nature of time itself? Our time, in this case, which you have now wasted making us chase you down. Richard moved to take another step forward, only to find a pair of bodies suddenly interposing themselves between he and Ellie. Both had taken out their phones and pointed the cameras toward him, though Richard didn't appear to realize the significance of that particular gesture. All right, fuckwad. You've got 3 seconds to back off my friend and explain what the hell you're doing here before I let the cops deal with a trespassing creep harassing the people who live here. Tori's ultimatum stunned Richard briefly, who responded by ignoring her and starting to press forward. Before he could shove them out of the way, Austin's hand closed around his shoulder. Mr. Hedman, what you're about to do is technically assault. I cannot in good conscience let that happen. Assault on video that we would absolutely use to press charges, and you can't fucking imagine how good our lawyers are, Tori confirmed. Austin really saved your ass there. What a stupid fuck up that would have been, huh? What an absolute shithead move. You have to be the dumbest, most inept dipstick in existence to make that kind of mistake. Glaring between the pair staring him down, Austin, and the phones pointed in his direction, Richard finally eased back ever so slightly, though his flushed face made it clear how unhappy he was with the outcome. That sentiment leaked into his voice as well. Who are these women anyway? The ones telling you to get out of our damn way because right now you're blocking a resident from entering their domicile, Beverly replied. Sheepishly, Kyle added a bit more context. These are our neighbors. Tori is the person we're here to run security for. Great job you're doing on that front, Ike tossed in. They got attacked in their apartment and now ambushed in the hall. You're really killing it. Oops, sorry, I meant me. You really killed me. Expression shifting from rage to a sneer, Richard looked the duo over once more. Ah, so this is the woman draining resources from the Alliance of Heroic Champions to serve her. And I'm done, Tori interrupted. Get the fuck out of my way, or explain this bullshit to the cops, and then on the news a few hours later when the clip goes viral, because in case you didn't know, people stupidly fucking with me is becoming sort of a trend. Ask your friends how much patience I have left on that front. He's not our friend. Ellie was shocked by the words, doubly so when she realized they'd come out of her mouth. For an instant she thought they were imagined like Ike, but Richard was shaking his head and Austin was staring at her in surprise, so it was clear they'd been spoken aloud. She expected to feel ashamed or guilty, yet in that moment Ellie found herself experiencing the last sensation she'd expected. Freedom. After all, since she'd already fucked up, why not make the most of it? Ike flashed her a thumbs up, but otherwise stayed uncharacteristically silent. He's going by Richard Hedman. Real identity, that of a dedicated suck-up and lackey to Professor Quantum. One that got forced onto our team in Presto's position. Trying to integrate him into our teamwork is the reason we've been putting in so many extra hours. Mostly 'cause he's genuinely terrible. It's no wonder he couldn't actually get on a team, let alone one like the New Science Sentries. Honestly, knowing how hard we all had to work for this, it's fucking insulting that he's considered a member. Kyle's mouth was hanging open. Austin looked torn between cheering and apologizing, and Richard was visibly fuming. Tori and Beverly, however, absorbed the information calmly. They looked to each other, some unspoken signal passing between the two, and then Tori smiled. Given her usual gruff disposition, it was an unusually broad, cheerful grin. One follow-up question here. Is that your real name or a code name? I'm trying to figure out if God hates you or just a fellow employee. Richard, whose hateful stare was still focused on Ellie, took several seconds to process Tori's question. What does that... It's a code name. Tori threw back her head and cackled, the piercing, mocking laughter ringing through the halls. That's the best! It's not a coincidence. Someone went out of their way to label you as a silly pretender not to be taken seriously. Richard Hedman? Come on, it's right there. They named you Dick Hedman. Dick Hedman? The flush of fury drained from Richard's face as the realization struck home, but worse was the snort of laughter from behind him. Quick as Kyle covered his mouth, they all knew what they'd heard. Ellie didn't bother hiding hers. At this point, she was either off the team or she wasn't, and for the first time in her adult life, Ellie wondered if that might be okay. It was all she'd wanted for so long. But with one friend gone and an asshole in his spot, the shine was off that apple. Ellie couldn't imagine a life outside of superhero work. That didn't mean she had to be part of the New Science Sentries to do it. How dare you speak to me in such a manner? Do you know how long No. Tori hit the word so hard it felt like she was mimicking Ivan. There was something about being spoken to as if this stranger had some inherent authority over the situation that pushed her buttons. Not to mention, after the past few weeks, Tori had more than a bit of frustration and anger stored up. I don't know shit about you, because you haven't done shit worth knowing about. Now, I know Plasmodia, that's for damn sure. I've seen her out there busting her ass to keep innocent people safe. I know Tachyonic and Agent Quantum, too. They've certainly put in the hours. And I knew Presto, who laid down his fucking life to protect the people he loved. But Dickhead Man? Never seen him out there. So if he wants respect so bad, maybe he should do something worthy of it. Because so far, all I've seen him do is trespass in our hallways and verbally harass my friend. Beverly stepped forward the moment Tori fell silent, getting closer to Richard, phone still at the ready. This is your last chance. You don't live here, and even if you recently moved in, you're still blocking access to our home. Get your sad, worthless ass out of our way. Or explain to Professor Quantum why his newest team member is stuck in a holding tank. Richard had apparently reached his own breaking point as he puffed out his chest in response. Nothing would please me more than to be away from your rude, disrespectful company. Come on, Plasmodia, let's continue this discussion in peace. Oh, he's pissed. Going to be one hell of a tantrum when those two are gone. Ike hooked out his thumbs, pointing over his shoulder at Tori and Beverly respectively. This is where you meekly tuck your tail and take the tongue lashing, right? Probably some punishing extra training on top. Fun times. Richard waited for Ellie to move to his side, and Ike kept staring at her, a wicked grin slowly spreading across his face before tossing out only 2 words more. Or not. No. It wasn't as forceful as Tori's, but Ellie contained a burning fury eager to scorch all in its path. Lifting her head, she felt her eyes literally blazing as touches of plasma manifested. Richard took a hurried step back, stricken by the sight. Good. Let him be scared. It was about time he realized who he was trying to order around. Why should I listen to you? You're not the leader of this team. You're our burden. An anchor tied to our leg is punishment for daring to mourn our friend instead of filling his spot. How about you jam whatever schedule you're complaining about up your ass, if there's still any room with your giant head wedged in there? The fear was gone from Richard's face, replaced by a literal snarl. When Professor Quantum hears... Richard's voice quickly trailed off as he realized Ellie was matching him word for word, speaking in unison with his threat. She laughed as he stopped, more sparks of plasma glowing in her eyes. Honestly, you say things like that and wonder why none of us ever take you seriously. Go ahead and tattle. At this point, I'm too tired to care. I bet Professor Quantum will give you a nice pat on the head, maybe even a tummy rub. And as I already said, if someone like you is on the new Science Sentries, it's not exactly the prestigious team I was aiming for anyway. At last, Richard allowed himself to be pulled back out of the middle of the hallway. Tori and Beverly walked past without a second glance, and Ellie was only a few steps behind. Text me if I get fired or not. My next patrol shift is until this evening, and I'm taking a damn nap. At her side, the imaginary Ike was wildly applauding. The real me would have absolutely loved that. Ellie knew he was right. She just wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad sign. Chapter 48. I'm sorry. Chloe was taken aback by the words, largely because they were the exact ones she'd been planning to speak once they left Wisby's room. But Lodestar had gotten there first, hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the closed door. It's a hard thing, seeing someone you want to help and not being able to. I'm the one who implied you'd be able to heal Wisby, and I'm sorry you had to experience that because of my mistake. Biting her lip, Chloe had to fight back the words she wanted to speak, explaining that, in fact, she probably could do it, maybe, but doing so required tapping into a scale of power that terrified her. Except, was that really the best move? If anyone could understand what it was to grapple with incredible world-shaping power, wouldn't it be Lodestar? What if there might be a way, Chloe said, selecting her words with the utmost care. The last thing she wanted to do was get Lodestar's, or heaven forbid, Wisby's, hopes up too high. There's an aspect to my power, an element I've been hesitant to test out. It's hard to explain, but there's a really powerful phrase with a specific effect. I think... As she searched for the right words, a recurring theme in Chloe's life, Lodestar laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's okay. I know about Edict. While her tongue froze, Chloe's eyes widened until they felt like dinner plates pressing at the edge of their sockets. Lodestar merely smiled. Like I mentioned at your apartment, I love the multiverse. Situations like our current dimensional breaches aside, I've always found it fascinating. seeing a world that's the same yet different, and all the interesting ways it causes things to change. Not to mention how everyone makes their own spin on things like movies. So I put considerable energy into studying it, and some of the faces who frequently pop up. But you didn't say anything about her. Despite Lodestar uttering the name, Chloe still couldn't quite bring herself to use it. I wasn't sure if you knew about her yet, Lodestar explained. Research like that means I've seen a lot of paths people's lives can take, or not take, as the case might be. Cliché doesn't always become edict. Heck, there's not always a cliché in the first place. I make it a policy not to try and steer other people's choice for them. Whether you knew about edict was based on your actions, and whether you become her should be the same. Silently, they began walking back through the network of hallways while Chloe pondered Lodestar's words. It wasn't until they were halfway to the exit that she piped up once more. It was a question she'd been wondering to herself ever since Nexus first told her about edict, and this seemed like the best chance to get an honest answer. Is edict evil? Sometimes, Lodestar replied, entirely prepared for the question. Without getting into the whole, is evil real or just a manifestation of humanity bit, yes, I have learned about some truly horrendous edicts. And I've also heard of edicts who are benevolent and kind, a handful who become the most trusted metahuman in their whole world. Edict is a version of you who has embraced power, not a version who is inherently bad. Shouldn't I reject it, though? There are so many stories about power corrupting, and it's so much power. The fear Chloe had been fighting back bubbled forth, unwilling to stay contained now that an escape route had finally manifested. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to become world famous. I like my life, I do. But whenever things go bad, I feel useless, and that's not exactly a thrill either. I'm scared I'm going to use this power in the wrong way, and I'm just as afraid I'm going to not use it when I should. Their steps ceased echoing through the hall as Chloe came to a halt, Lodestar at her side. Do you remember what Wisby said about how I slapped Faithful when I beat him? Chloe not only remembered she'd planned on searching the internet to see video of the incident when she got home. Of course. I wasn't showboating, nor trying to embarrass him. The truth is I was fighting as hard as I could to hold myself back. I knew that team. They were my friends, and he betrayed them. Murder is bad enough, but we know this job comes with certain risks. Being killed by someone you trusted, an ally who'd been through thick and thin with you, that's a step beyond. Lodestar paused, glancing away for only a moment before meeting Chloe's eyes once more. I slapped Faithful because if I threw anything harder, I was going to kill him. Chloe swallowed, trying to imagine feeling that kind of anger inside and still managing to hold back. She wasn't sure if she had it in her. The phrase power corrupts is a trick. It's an idiom that pretends to be a warning when really it scares off the kind of people who should be in power while posing no threat to those who don't fear corruption. I've always preferred power reveals because it's proven true in my experience. Give someone the ability to do anything, and you'll get a good sense of what kind of world they want. None of us are perfect or removed from temptation, not even me. What matters are the choices we make in the moment. Trust yourself. I think you'll pick the right ones. Nice as that sounded, Chloe wasn't nearly so certain of herself. She did feel a bit less afraid, though, knowing that choosing to be Edict and turning into the kind of person who won Nexus's attention weren't one and the same. Lodestar said there were good versions out there, ones who weren't corrupted by power. Or maybe hadn't been evil to start with? Considering the idea that power would reveal her true desires, perhaps the best step forward was deciding what it was that Chloe wanted. Although there was one entry already etched upon that list. If I ever do become Edict, I'll try again to heal Wisby. I'm sure she'd appreciate that. Just be careful not to let a sense of guilt drive you. What happened to Wisby isn't on you, or any of the other metas who've tried to heal her over the years. Faithful is the one to blame, and sooner or later I'm going to find him. Seeing the glare in Lodestar's eyes, Chloe knew for certain if it had been directed toward her, she'd use Edict's words in an ultimately fruitless attempt to escape. Wherever Faithful was, it was no wonder he was staying hidden. When Lodestar caught up to him next time, it looked like there might be more in store than just a slap. And with the memory of Wisby's face still fresh in Chloe's mind, she couldn't help pulling for exactly that outcome. What had once been a pitiful offering of trinkets was now a mountain of treasures. At the bottom layer were the artifacts, various seemingly random baubles that emitted auras of tremendous magical energy. Next came the magical items Ivan had purposely collected. These ranged from enchanted jugs of splendid wines, to animated cutlery that fed a guest, all the way to bespelled sconces, which had been ripped from the walls. Ivan had left no stone uncrushed in his looting. Above